"Step out of the vehicle," Officer Katherine Bell commanded, her voice sharp as a blade. Alex Carter could feel the tension rise, but he didn't flinch. He'd been here before, stopped and harassed simply for being a black man in a nice car. But tonight was different. When Katherine grabbed his wrist and twisted it behind his back, slapping the cuffs on him, Alex knew the fight was just beginning. She called it resisting arrest, but Alex had done nothing wrong. She didn't see him as a man. She saw him as a threat, just because of the color of his skin. But what Katherine didn't know was that Alex wasn't backing down. The truth was about to unravel, and everything she believed in would come crashing down. This is just the beginning. Will Alex get the justice he deserves, or will the system swallow him whole? If you stand for truth, justice, and the fight against corruption, hit like, subscribe, and don't miss the next chapter. The battle is about to get even more intense. Stay tuned. San Francisco, summer 2024. A sleek black sports car glides through the bustling streets of the city. Its driver, Alex Carter, a 32-year-old man with a calm demeanor and a furrowed brow. He just wrapped up a stressful day in tech, his mind still buzzing with numbers and projects. As night falls, the city's skyline glows, reflecting off the pavement, painting a picture of San Francisco's endless energy. At a red light, a flash of headlights suddenly cuts through the evening, blinding Alex for a moment. A police siren blares from behind him. Officer Katherine Bell, a 45-year-old cop with over 20 years in the force, steps out of her patrol car. Her sharp hazel eyes scan the street, landing on Alex. As she walks toward him, her gaze hardens. Katherine is used to encountering criminals on her beat, but something about Alex, his smooth confidence, his luxury car, and his unspoken defiance, sets her off. "Pull over," Katherine commands, her voice sharp as a blade slicing through the still air. Alex, startled but composed, meets her gaze without fear. "I don't think there's anything wrong with my car, officer," Alex replies in a calm, collected tone. Her eyes narrow as she approaches. "Get out of the vehicle. Now," she demands, already assuming control of the situation. Alex hesitates for only a moment, then slowly opens the car door. He steps out, standing tall, his posture straight. Despite the rising tension, he remains unshaken. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I just want to know what this is about," he asks, his voice level and firm. Katherine's annoyance flares. She doesn't like how Alex stands there unmoving, looking at her without any fear. He's not cowering, he's not apologizing, and that infuriates her. "Hands on the car," she snaps, her fingers twitching toward her holster. "Now!" Alex sighs, his patience wearing thin, but he does as told, placing his hands on the warm metal of the car. Katherine doesn't waste time. She strides over, grabbing his wrist with an uncomfortable force, twisting it behind his back. She slaps the cuffs on him with a harsh click. "Resisting arrest," she mutters through gritted teeth, though Alex hasn't moved an inch. "I'm not resisting," Alex counters quietly, wincing at the pressure on his wrist. "You're making a mistake." Katherine ignores him. She pushes him roughly against the car, her elbow digging into his ribs. A small crowd starts to gather across the street, some taking videos, some whispering. The tension rises, and Katherine basks in the small victory of having control. "Suspicious behavior," Katherine announces loudly for the onlookers. "Possible burglary suspect." Her voice is dripping with mock authority as she shoves Alex into the back of her cruiser, slamming the door behind him. As she drives him to the station, Alex doesn't panic. He's been here before, stopped and harassed by the police simply for being a black man in a nice car. But this time, he knows something is different. The world is watching, and he's not the only one paying attention. Stay tuned as Alex Carter's battle for justice unfolds. Hit like, subscribe, and don't miss the next episode where secrets and conspiracies come to light. You won't want to miss it. San Francisco, 3 weeks before the courtroom drama. The golden hues of a late afternoon sun dipped low behind the city's towering skyline. The streets of the financial district were lined with upscale cafes, corporate buildings, and designer shops. Alex Carter sat behind the wheel of his sleek, black sports sedan, a man on a mission, to go home after another long day. His broad shoulders were relaxed in his crisp navy jacket, the soft hum of jazz coming from the radio providing a calming backdrop. At 32, Alex had spent years earning a reputation in the tech world. He wasn't a man who needed to prove himself anymore, but trouble had a way of finding him, and tonight was no different. His peaceful drive would soon be interrupted by a presence that had been watching him long before he knew it. Around the corner, parked by a boutique with frosted windows, sat Officer Katherine Bell, a woman who had spent over 20 years on the force. Catherine's blonde buzz cut caught the last rays of the day's light as she kept a close eye on the traffic. Her narrow hazel eyes scanned the road, locking in on Alex's car as it cruised by. Catherine's fingers drummed on the steering wheel. Her gut twisted when she saw Alex. It wasn't the first time she'd seen a well-dressed man in a luxury car, but there was something about Alex's confident posture, the way he moved through the world, that irritated her. She'd seen men like him before, and they didn't belong here. Not in Buckhead, not in her city, and certainly not with the kind of car he was driving. The moment Alex slowed at a stoplight, Katherine flicked on her headlights, the beams slicing through the darkness. Her patrol car rolled forward, and she pulled up alongside him, her window already buzzing down. "Got a broken tail light, sir," she barked, her voice cutting through the quiet of the night. But Alex knew better. She hadn't even checked. Alex's eyes flicked to hers, his calm gaze meeting hers without fear. "I don't think so, officer. I had it serviced last week," he replied, his voice polite but firm. Catherine's lip curled slightly, the irritation growing in her chest. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't apologizing. He was too calm, too collected, and that set her off even more. She threw open her door, her boots hitting the pavement with a hard thud. "Step out of the vehicle," she commanded, her tone laced with authority. Alex exhaled, his fingers momentarily still on the wheel. He knew what this was. He'd been here before. From the time he was a teenager, stopped in his own neighborhood, to every time the police had pulled him over simply because of the way he looked, Alex knew the drill. His hands went to the door and he stepped out, standing tall at 6 feet 2 inches. His suit pressed neatly against the cool evening air, his hands visible and steady. "Can I ask what this is about?" Alex asked, his voice even, his demeanor calm. Catherine's posture tightened. "You're in a high-crime area," she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. "Driving too slow, looking like you don't belong here. I need to see some ID." Her words were a lie, a blatant one. Buckhead wasn't some crime-ridden slum. It was a district full of high-end shops and pristine streets. But to Katherine, Alex's presence, his smooth stride, the way he held himself, was a threat. He didn't belong here in her world. Alex's jaw tightened as he reached for his wallet, his lips pressing into a thin line. "I live 5 miles from here," he said, handing over his license. Katherine snatched it from his hand, barely glancing at the name Alex Carter, before tossing it on the hood of her cruiser. "Sure you do," she muttered, her sneer deepening. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the flashing lights. A mix of curious shoppers, some with coffee cups in hand, others just loitering in the area. A few of them whispered, some pulled out their phones, recording every second of the scene unfolding. Katherine noticed the growing crowd, and it fueled her, made her chest puff out. She took a step closer to Alex, her breath sharp and tinged with the stale coffee she had been drinking earlier. "Hands on the car!" she barked again. "Now!" Alex's patience was beginning to wear thin. He pressed his palms against the warm metal of his sedan, the sound of the crowd murmuring in the background. His body was tense, but his mind was still. "Officer," he said, his voice calm, "I've done nothing wrong. You haven't even told me what I'm suspected of." Catherine's eyes flashed with rage. She could feel him challenging her authority, and she wasn't about to let him win. "I said hands on the car now," she growled. Her hand twitched toward her baton. Alex sighed deeply, the slow exhale of someone who knew this dance all too well. Compliance was the only way out. He could feel the familiar sting of injustice crawling under his skin, but he didn't let it show. He placed both hands firmly on the hood of the car, his jaw clenched. San Francisco, 3 days after the arrest. The streets of San Francisco had never felt so heavy. The city's usual bustle, its vibrant life and neon lights, seemed dimmed in the wake of Alex Carter's arrest. His face, now plastered across the news, was the latest symbol in the ongoing battle for justice, and people were taking sides. The viral video, capturing Officer Katherine Bell's brutality during Alex's arrest, had exploded across social media. Justice for Alex trended nationwide. Stop Racist Cops was everywhere, the hashtags fueling a firestorm that demanded action. The public was divided. Some saw Alex as a hero, a man fighting back against a corrupt system. Others saw him as a troublemaker, a criminal deserving of the consequences of his actions. But one thing was certain: Katherine Bell had underestimated Alex. She had thought the power of her badge and her status in the system would silence him. But all it had done was turn him into a symbol of defiance. Inside his apartment, Alex sat with his wife, Sierra, a strong-willed woman in her late 20s with a sharp gaze. Her braided hair was pulled tightly back, her expression intense as she handed him a coal pack for the bruises left by the arrest. "You sure about this?" Sierra asked softly, her voice laced with concern, though it held a quiet determination. She knew the risks involved, but she also knew the fight was worth it. Alex had been targeted. Now it was time to fight back, harder than ever before. Alex nodded, his fingers hovering over the laptop's upload button. The dash cam footage of his arrest, now playing on a loop in his mind, felt like the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just about his freedom anymore. This was about dismantling a corrupt system that had taken so much from people like him. "This is the only way," Alex said, determination thick in his voice. "This isn't just for me anymore. It's for everyone who's ever been wrongfully stopped, harassed, or worse." With a decisive click, the video shot into the digital ether, quickly spreading like wildfire. By morning, it had amassed 50,000 views. By midday, it doubled to 100,000. The hashtag surged even higher. The pressure was mounting. 3 days later, the backlash intensifies. By noon, the city was in an uproar. Protesters filled the streets of San Francisco, chanting Alex's name and waving signs demanding justice. The media vans were parked outside the police precinct, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions at a wall of tight-lipped officers. Alex sat at his kitchen table, the buzz of the city just outside his window, his phone vibrating in his hand. A news anchor with slick-back hair appeared on his screen, announcing the latest update. Officer Katherine Bell has been suspended pending investigation following the viral video showing her using excessive force during the arrest of Alex Carter, a man accused of resisting arrest. For a brief moment, Alex allowed himself a breath of relief. His heart was still heavy with the weight of everything he had been through. But this was a victory, a small but significant win. Sierra, her eyes glistening with hope, squeezed his hand as she watched the report unfold. "Maybe this will change something," she whispered, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. Alex's thoughts were elsewhere, though. He'd faced down bigger bullies before. Katherine Bell was just a piece of the puzzle. The real fight, the fight against the system that had been broken for so long, was still ahead of him. He knew the stakes were high. Victor Hayes, the man who had been pulling strings behind the scenes, was far from done, and Katherine Bell would do whatever it took to regain control. The night before the storm. As the San Francisco skyline glittered under the night sky, Victor Hayes sat in his downtown office, his fingers tapping rhythmically on his desk. His thoughts were focused, calculating. He wasn't going to let Alex Carter's uprising derail his plans. Victor, with his wealth, connections, and power within the city's legal system, had never lost a battle, and he wasn't about to start now. He dialed a number on his phone, his voice low but filled with venom. "Katherine, it's time to step up your game. We need to crush this before it goes any further." Meanwhile, Katherine Bell, her buzzed hair still damp from a shower, sat in her cramped apartment, the lights dim. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the flood of online comments condemning her actions. It was clear now. She was losing control, but she wouldn't back down, not without a fight. "I'll handle this," Katherine muttered to herself, determination flooding her veins. She had already been suspended once, but she wasn't going to let Alex win. She'd do whatever it took to bury him, even if it meant working with Victor Hayes to dig up dirt and manipulate the system even further. The plot unfolds. Katherine's next move was calculated. She would stop at nothing. Under the cover of darkness, she slipped into a local pawn shop, using Victor Hayes' connections to get what she needed: a gun. Reggie, a thug she'd used in the past, was stationed nearby with instructions to plant it in Alex's car, framing him once again. She worked quickly, silently, tucking the weapon under the spare tire, ensuring that Alex's sedan would be his undoing. The plan was simple. Once the gun was found, the media would flip the narrative. Alex would go from a victim of police brutality to a criminal. No different from the criminals Katherine had spent her career hunting down. She dialed a burner phone, her voice muffled as she spoke. "Check Alex Carter's car, Peachtree Lane. He's armed, dangerous." Katherine smiled as she hung up. This time there would be no turning back for Alex. The stage was set. The final act was about to begin. Back at Alex's apartment. The next morning, Alex's phone buzzed incessantly. He had gained significant traction online, but it wasn't over. He knew that Katherine Bell wouldn't give up so easily, and Victor Hayes was already plotting his next move. As Alex stepped outside, his heart sank. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and closer. He barely had time to react before 3 squad cars screeched into his driveway, their flashing lights illuminating the morning sky. A voice boomed over the loudspeaker. "Alex Carter, hands up!" Before Alex could process what was happening, he was surrounded. Officers spilled out of their cars, guns drawn, shouting commands. Katherine Bell watched from a block away, her smug grin returning as she witnessed the plan fall into place. Alex, now stunned and confused, could only raise his hands, his mind racing to figure out how things had escalated so quickly. "I didn't do this," he said, his voice shaking with disbelief. But it didn't matter. The crowd gathered, neighbors whispering, phones recording, already had their conclusions drawn, and the officers swarming around him didn't hesitate. The weapon was found, and Alex was arrested once more. The sounds of sirens still echoed in Alex's head as the officers dragged him back to the precinct. His mind was a haze of confusion and disbelief. Just hours before, he had been a free man, fighting for his name, fighting for justice. Now he was back where he started, sitting in a cold, concrete holding cell. The brief taste of freedom he'd experienced was gone, snatched away by a calculated move orchestrated by Officer Katherine Bell and Victor Hayes. As the car doors slammed shut, the reality of the situation settled in. Katherine had framed him. The gun planted in his car was the perfect setup. The plan was simple. If the police found a weapon, Alex would be a criminal in their eyes, no different from any other thug on the streets. This was no longer just about a wrongful arrest. It was about destroying everything Alex had worked for, turning the public's view of him from a victim to a villain. Inside the precinct, Katherine Bell was already walking around, her boots clicking loudly against the tile floor. Her face was taut, but there was a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. She had gotten what she wanted. Alex Carter was back where he belonged, behind bars. The media would twist the story. They'd already found the gun, and the story was practically written. She was going to get away with it, again. Across the room, Victor Hayes sat behind a desk, a cigar clenched in his teeth. His grin spread across his face as he flipped through paperwork. The bombshell video of Alex's first arrest had created a storm, but now with the weapon planted, he could easily turn the tables. The corruption within the force would remain hidden. His connections ran deep, and with Katherine's help, he was about to secure his own victory. Hours earlier, the trap is set. The night before, Alex had sat in his apartment, staring at his phone screen, watching his viral video spreading across the internet. His hopes were high. He thought that the truth finally was on his side. The dash cam footage from his car was irrefutable, showing exactly what happened during his initial arrest. The video was reaching thousands, maybe millions. His story was being heard, but behind the scenes, Katherine Bell was already working fast to turn the narrative. She had already planted the gun. All she needed was to tip off the police, make sure they found it at the right time, and everything would fall into place. In a rundown corner of the city, Reggie, a criminal Katherine had used before, was given the task of setting up Alex. He didn't ask questions. He just did what he was told. The gun was hidden, and the plan was set in motion. By the time the sirens had started to wail, it was too late for Alex to stop the storm that was coming for him. The arrest revisited. At the precinct, Alex Carter sat handcuffed, staring at the concrete walls. His wrists were raw from the cuffs, and his shoulders ached from the rough handling. But he wasn't thinking about the pain. He was thinking about how this had all happened, how Katherine Bell had set him up, how Victor Hayes was pulling the strings behind it all, and how he had been so close to exposing them. The truth was slipping away, and Alex felt the weight of it pressed down on his chest. Across the room, officers were busy with paperwork. Phones rang, radios squawked. No one even looked at Alex as he sat there, his fate sealed. He knew the truth. He wasn't guilty, but now that truth felt almost irrelevant. He was facing new charges now, charges that the system could easily manipulate. Possession of a firearm, resisting arrest, inciting violence, all fabricated, all designed to bury him. Katherine, her hair now pulled back into a neat bun, walked past Alex's cell. Her eyes flickered with a brief, cold satisfaction. The victory was hers for now. She hadn't just gotten Alex arrested again. She'd successfully planted the perfect lie. Tanya Brooks, the last hope. In the midst of this storm, Tanya Brooks, Alex's fierce attorney, was working overtime. She was a woman with a voice like thunder and a mind like a razor blade. When she first took Alex's case, she didn't know just how deep the corruption ran, but now she could see it. She could feel the walls closing in. The system was rigged, and Alex was caught in the middle. Tanya had already reviewed the evidence. She knew the video wasn't enough to clear Alex's name, not now. The gun in his car had changed everything. Without that critical piece of evidence, the case against Alex would be all but unbreakable. But Tanya wasn't one to back down. She knew something the cops didn't. She had the truth. And the truth had a way of coming out, even if it had to be dragged kicking and screaming. The shift in power hours passed. The precinct was quiet, the usual hum of activity almost stifling. Alex sat in his cell, his thoughts racing, when suddenly the door to the holding area slammed open. Tanya stepped inside, her heels clicking on the cold floor. She walked toward him with purpose, her face set, her eyes sharp. "We need to move quickly," Tanya said, her voice low but confident. She handed Alex a piece of paper, a printout with a name on it. "This is your next move. We have something that can destroy their case." Alex's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Tanya didn't answer directly. Instead, she nodded at the piece of paper. "You'll know what to do, but it won't be easy." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Tanya had found a way in, a potential whistleblower within the department. Someone who knew about Victor Hayes' dirty dealings, someone who could expose everything. But Alex knew that blowing the whistle wouldn't be enough. They were going to have to act fast. Victor Hayes had too much power. Katherine Bell had too much influence. And Alex was about to find out just how dangerous it could be to take them on directly. Katherine Bell and Victor Hayes, the final trap. While Tanya strategized, Katherine Bell and Victor Hayes continued their moves behind closed doors. Their plan was simple: keep Alex locked up long enough to break his spirit and force him to plea. They knew the longer they kept him in jail, the more likely he would crack. They had all the cards, or so they thought. But what they didn't know was that Alex wasn't the only one playing this game. Tanya had already set her own trap in motion. The whistleblower would speak. The truth would be revealed. And the walls Katherine and Victor had built so carefully around their empire would start to crumble. The real war begins. As the days went by, Alex sat in his cell, the echoes of his thoughts reverberating off the concrete walls. He had been wrongfully arrested, framed, and thrown into the depths of a corrupt system. But he wasn't broken. He had something Katherine and Victor couldn't control: patience. He had time, and when the moment came, he would make them regret ever underestimating him. The fight was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The weight of the world seemed to press down on Alex Carter. Days in jail had turned to weeks, and his fight for freedom felt like it was slipping further away with each passing hour. The once clear victory he'd seen in the viral video, the hope he'd felt when his story reached thousands, had been clouded by the gun planted in his car and the fabricated charges. The system had closed ranks, and his name had become a stain on the city's reputation. The media had twisted the story, calling him a thug, a criminal who deserved to be locked away. His own community, once rallying behind him, was now divided, whispers of doubt starting to creep in. Inside the holding cell, Alex sat on a hard, cold bench, his eyes fixed on the floor. His mind raced, reflecting on the events that had led him here. Katherine Bell had taken everything from him, weaponizing the system to crush him under the weight of fabricated lies. But deep down, Alex knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. His attorney, Tanya Brooks, had been relentless. She had exposed the video. She had revealed the flaws in the police narrative. And now she was looking for the final piece of the puzzle. But it wasn't enough. She needed something bigger, something that would break the entire case wide open. And Victor Hayes, the puppet master behind the scenes, still wasn't finished. The final clue one evening, as Alex sat in his cell, staring at the dull concrete walls, a knock echoed through the door. It was Tanya, her face tight with determination. She handed him a sealed envelope, her gaze steely. "You've been patient, Alex. Now it's time to bring the fight to them," she said, her voice low but confident. Alex opened the envelope with care. Inside was a single piece of paper, a series of phone numbers and dates, linked to a series of transactions that would blow the case wide open. "The whistleblower," Tanya explained, "has come through. Reggie, the thug Katherine used to plant the gun, wasn't the only one with a story to tell. I've tracked Victor Hayes' financial connections to the city's underground, and it's all here. We've got proof, enough to take down the whole system. We just need to act fast." Alex's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the final clue that would bring everything crashing down. "You've got one shot at this, Alex. We go in now, or we lose everything," Tanya added, her eyes locking onto his. The game shifts outside. Victor Hayes had no idea what was coming. His connections within the department were as solid as ever. He'd pulled the strings to ensure Katherine Bell stayed on track, using her to manipulate evidence, to silence anyone who could expose the truth. The financial web he had weaved was tangled deep into the city's political and legal landscape, and he had no intention of letting Alex Carter or anyone else take it from him. Victor sat at his desk in his office, a glass of whiskey in his hand, flipping through paperwork. His face, once confident, was now furrowed in thought. He had spent decades building his empire in San Francisco, and Alex was just a small obstacle, until now. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number. "Katherine, I think it's time we put an end to this," he said in a low voice. Make sure he stays locked up, whatever it takes. Katherine's voice crackled on the other end of the line. Don't worry, Victor. This isn't over yet. I've got this. Victor hung up, his face set. He knew this was only the beginning of the end for Alex, but he didn't know that Alex had already set his trap, and this time, the tables would turn. The sting. That night, Tanya and Alex made their move. Armed with the new evidence and their knowledge of Victor's network, they knew they were on borrowed time. The truth was now in their hands, and they had one shot to take down Victor Hayes and Katherine Bell. Tanya arranged a meeting with a local investigative journalist, Mara Daniels, known for exposing corruption in the city. They met in a dimly lit cafe, the buzz of the city outside barely cutting through the tension inside. Tanya handed over the files, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. We're going public, Tanya said. This can't stay hidden anymore. We have the proof, and we're going to make sure the world sees it. Mara nodded, her eyes sharp. This is bigger than just you and me. This will bring down an entire network of corruption. But we need to move fast. Once the press gets hold of this, the system won't be able to stop us. Alex sat nearby, his pulse racing. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. An opportunity to strike back, to expose the truth to the public. But he knew this was only the first step. The real battle would unfold in the courtrooms and the streets, where the truth would be tested in ways he couldn't yet predict. The press conference. The following morning, the media gathered outside San Francisco City Hall, eager to hear the latest developments in the case that had taken the city by storm. Alex, now free on bail, stood at the podium alongside Tanya and Mara. The camera lights flashed, and the reporters surged forward, microphones thrust into Alex's face. Mr. Carter, what do you have to say about the charges against you? One reporter asked. Alex took a deep breath. His voice was calm, steady. I've been framed. The charges against me are lies, and I'm here to expose the truth. The police, Katherine Bell and Victor Hayes, have been using their power to manipulate evidence, to target innocent people like me. And now it's time for them to face justice, the crowd murmured, the reporters scribbling furiously as Alex continued. This is bigger than just one man. This is about the system. It's about corruption that's been allowed to fester in this city for far too long. I'm not the only one who's been affected by this, and I won't stop until the truth is heard. The press erupted into chaos, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing. But Alex remained unfazed. This was his moment, the moment he took back his power. The fall of Katherine Bell and Victor Hayes. As the news broke, the San Francisco Police Department was thrown into disarray. Katherine Bell was suspended, and an internal investigation was launched into her actions. The files Alex had uncovered, Victor's financial dealings, his ties to the underground network, the illegal transactions, were now public knowledge. The press had done its job, and now the police had no choice but to investigate the man who had been pulling the strings for so long. Victor Hayes, ever the manipulator, had tried to cover his tracks, but it was too late. FBI agents arrived at his office, the raid swift and decisive. As they hauled him away in cuffs, his face pale, the world watched. The empire he had built over decades was crumbling before his eyes. Katherine Bell, once the star of the San Francisco Police Department, found herself in the same cell that Alex had occupied just days earlier. Her face, now devoid of its smug confidence, was a mask of defeat. The aftermath. Months later, Alex Carter stood at the podium again, this time for a victory speech. The fight wasn't over, not yet, but it was a start. The charges against him had been dropped, and Katherine Bell and Victor Hayes were facing trial for their corruption. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the people who had supported him, the people who had believed in him, and the people who had suffered because of the same system. He looked at Sierra, who stood beside him, her hand in his. They had made it through the storm, together. "The battle isn't over," Alex said, his voice steady and strong. "But we've taken the first step, and we'll keep fighting until justice is truly served." The crowd erupted in applause, but for Alex, the journey had just begun. San Francisco, 6 months later. The city that had once felt so vast and indifferent now felt smaller, more personal to Alex Carter. The skyline of San Francisco remained as beautiful as ever, but it no longer represented the same dream of success and wealth it once had. Now it stood as a symbol of the struggle for justice that had defined his life over the past year. Alex had risen from the ashes of false accusations and corrupt law enforcement, but the fight was far from over. The FBI had launched a full-scale investigation into Victor Hayes and his criminal empire. The ripple effects of their downfall reached far beyond just the police department. It had infiltrated political circles, businesses, and even local neighborhoods. But while some had begun to talk, many remained quiet, knowing the cost of speaking out could be steep. The wounds of corruption ran deep, and Alex knew that real change would take more than just one victory. It would take a revolution, a new opportunity. Alex had spent the last 6 months working with Tanya Brooks, his tenacious lawyer, and Mara Daniels, the investigative journalist who had helped him expose the truth. They'd become more than allies. They had become the core of a movement that was taking shape. With Victor Hayes behind bars and Katherine Bell suspended indefinitely, the spotlight had shifted to the next chapter: reform. But reform didn't come easily. The political establishment was slow to change, and those who had enabled the corrupt system were still in power, trying to protect themselves. Alex had begun working with activist groups, local community leaders, and even some well-placed allies in law enforcement to push for change. One evening, as the orange glow of the setting sun filled the sky, Alex sat across from Sierra, his wife. Their apartment, modest yet comfortable, reflected a sense of calm that had been a long time coming. "You've done it, Alex," Sierra said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. She handed him a cup of tea, her fingers brushing his hand. "But it's not over yet, is it?" Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Not by a long shot," he replied, his voice steady but resolute. "The system's still broken. We've made progress, but there's more work to do. People are starting to listen, but we have to keep pushing until the change sticks." The weight of the journey they had both been through weighed on them. Sierra had been his anchor throughout this storm, but she too knew that their work was just beginning. Alex's name had been cleared, but the corruption that had nearly ruined him was still there, still festering beneath the surface. The final confrontation months passed, and Alex found himself at the center of a new battle. This time, it wasn't just about his personal freedom, it was about the freedom of an entire community, the dismantling of a corrupt system that had been allowed to operate unchecked for decades. As the new movement began to gain traction, the San Francisco Police Department felt the heat. The city council held hearings, the public demanded answers, and a new wave of activists pushed for immediate reforms. Alex was invited to speak at rallies, to testify before the city council, and even to speak with government officials. But there was one more piece of the puzzle: the final confrontation with those who still clung to power. In a private meeting with Sierra, Tanya, and a few trusted allies, Alex was presented with an opportunity to expose the last remnants of Victor's empire. "We've got everything we need to take down the rest of the corruption in the department," Tanya said, her voice low but confident. "But it won't be easy. We need to target the system at the very top. We need to expose the city's darkest secrets, those who protected Victor all along." Alex looked around at his team, the people who had helped him fight for justice. It was time for one final push. "Let's do it," he said. "We have to finish what we started." The evidence revealed. The day of the final confrontation arrived. It wasn't a trial, it wasn't a rally. It was a direct assault on the corrupt individuals who had shielded Victor Hayes for years. Mara Daniels, the fearless investigative journalist who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes, had uncovered a treasure trove of damning evidence. Documents, financial transactions, phone records, and testimony from former officers who had finally come forward. The information was enough to unravel the entire network that had supported Victor's corrupt reign. Alex, Tanya, and Mara presented their findings to the public in a coordinated press conference that would shake the foundation of the city's power structure. As they revealed their discoveries, one by one, the faces of corrupt officials and business leaders flashed on the screen behind them. The evidence was irrefutable. Victor Hayes' empire wasn't just a few crooked cops. It was an entire system that had poisoned the heart,